No, I agree, and I would move to approve the use of $5,000 from the Chickering Trust to cover the cost of repairs to the Hearst House at Highland Cemetery. Mr.
So
Hoffman?
moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye?
Thank you.
Thanks, Pope.
Now, I understand our next step is we need a contract from the construction company. So I'll get that in motion.
Chris should be able to help you with that, right, Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
So I
You
should,
met Chris?
yes.
Okay.
So Chris, I should come and see you, or,
We'll work together to get that together, yep.
because I want to get the contract to him as soon as possible, so we can get on the schedule and get this work done, hopefully the month of October. I don't know how long it takes to get the funds approved, but, you've approved it, but then you've got to,
I'm going from memory, and I think it was an easy process once we had the approval to transfer the funds and make them available. But I'm going to rely on Chris for the mechanics of this.
I know we did it for the
Right,
fence.
we did it for the fence, and I believe it was a seamless process, so I'm sure there's a process that will follow. I know the key is getting our approval, which you have this evening.
What?
Getting our approval.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. The next item of business is the Carroll Community Center presentation. And this is, we asked the Carroll Community Project Group to make a presentation to us this evening in anticipation of the special town meeting that is going to happen on October the 7th. There's been a lot of information that's been disseminated in the community. There's been a push to get the information out there. There've been a lot of open forums, I know that. And we thought that this evening, you're probably at the point where you have refined the presentation and the information that you're disseminating, and we were hoping that you would share that with us. And Mrs. Spalding, I understand that you are going to be making a presentation.
Well, I gather I am. This will be sort of a thumbnail presentation. You all decided that you wanted to appoint a committee to study Carroll in terms of looking at two options that we would present to the town at a special town meeting, which would be renovation of the building, existing building, and a new building. Which was our charge, and that's exactly what we did. The first thing we did is we spent time taking a look at and getting information. Is the building used? How active it is? And I would determine, and our committee would determine, it's a very active building. It's a large building, but it's a very active building. Between October 17 and December 2018, 25 different community organizations used the building. 300 renters. There were 300 people that rented space in that building to use it. So it's very active. We have a lot more information which we can find on our website, and I'll be giving you that later. But the building is truly active and a very valuable part of the community. In it, you have all kinds of activities such as spinning, rowing classes, martial arts, stretching, balance, all those kinds of activities. There are private parties, community lunches, meetings, government groups are in there. So it's a busy building, and therefore it deserves our attention. The first thing we looked at was renovation. And what we did is there are 20 years of material, all on the Dover website. 20 years of material.
Just hard to find.
No, it's not that hard to find, Robin, if you really work at it.
And you have some help.
And you have some help, and usually I'm asking for help. But there's 20 years of material. The committees that have been appointed before have all done a superior job. They've presented the town with the proper information to make a decision, and they should all be congratulated as we go through this. We also talked to Don Mills, the former architect. We spent some time with him. And you, the selectmen, asked that a company, a consulting company, Onsite Insight, come in and take a look at the material and take a look at the building. Interestingly enough, all that information comes out the same. There's really no huge discrepancy that's there. We've taken a look at the cost of that. Mark can get up a little bit to look at today's costs. And our estimate to renovate the building really falls in two forms. One, we could do a $10 million renovation, which would mean replacing the building heating and ventilation system, complying ADA and code requirements, upgrades to mechanical and electrical systems, and a fire suppression system, which in Dover also means an underground fire tank. Building and architectural, structural and exterior work would be done, improvement of hall and stairs, improvement of corridors, finishing, lighting, and et cetera. Then we also looked at an enhanced renovation. The enhanced renovation would do something that I think is really needed badly.
Value add.
And it's an entrance. To go into that building, there's really no entrance. There are 2 or 3 ways to get in a building, and in this day and age, that's wrong. We should have one entrance. That's a proper entrance, and you come in and you have a desk where you're checked in, you're scanned in, and a proper entrance. And the other thing that we found with other community centers is there was a welcoming area, a place that you could have a cup of coffee or meet other people and citizens. So that would be part of an enhanced renovation. In addition, there would be some, where we could do it, we don't know at this point, movement of walls depending on what type of rooms that you need in there. And I think more, just as importantly, is a renovation of the second floor library. So that would be about a $13 million renovation. We then looked at new.
Not 13 in addition, in total.
Total.
So
Total
we're
13.
add-
You know, that includes the 5 million, 4.5 million that was
maintenance.
there, deferred maintenance of 2 years ago. Then you'd add on to that the work that I explained, which would be a 10, and then it becomes to the 13. And so that's how we work that. We then looked at new, and the way we looked at new was, let's look at other communities, let's see what they have done. So we went to and/or talked to 15 communities, from the North Shore to the west of Boston to neighboring communities around us of varying sizes. They're as large as a Lexington or a Needham. They're large communities, and then there are small communities like a Stowe, Manchester by the Sea, Hamilton, some of those others that we looked at. We identified 3 buildings which we thought made the most sense based on population. The first would be Stowe. Stowe, which is a little northwest of us, roughly 6,000 people. They have a community center which is about 11 to 13,000 square feet. Plus, there is storage space, which is another 10,000 or so, and a fire station. How do you get it done? You team up with a fire station and you can get anything done. But that was a renovation, and that's what they did. Very active, very vibrant, and a great center. The other one we looked at is Weston. Weston was done a little while ago. It's a bigger town, we understand that, but some people think Dover and Weston sort of go hand in hand, so I think it was important to look at that building. And then the third one that really made sense to us was not what I would call a true community center, it's a senior center, and that's the Wellesley Tolles Parson building on Route 16 across from the police station. Very attractive building, and so those are the 3 buildings we looked at. They're all in the range of anywhere from 11,000 to roughly 16,000, 17,000 square feet. Interestingly enough, they also are very similar in a way to ours. There are roughly 7 what I would call activity rooms. A couple of them are very large rooms, and then there are smaller rooms, but there are about 7 activity rooms. There are conference rooms, 1 or 2 in the room, offices, and appropriate offices for recreation and the Council on Aging. When I say appropriate, for example, when you look at what the Council on Aging would need is not what they have now. That's really inferior. What they need there is they need a good office, a couple of other offices for conferences or medical care, maybe a outside room where people could meet and get to know each other, things like that. They're all identical to that. There's one entrance. They all have one entrance, and when you go into the Wellesley Tolls building, it's very attractive when you go in. You're greeted by somebody, you check in, you can go have coffee, maybe Danish or fruit or whatever they have, and then go about your business.
You go there for breakfast.
No, they don't really do breakfast. Now, you could go to a Natick, which is a lot larger, and you could have breakfast. You can't do that there.
Well, a coffee and a Danish is breakfast.
That works for, it means you don't have to go, Robin, for you and I to meet at Bagel's Best in Medfield. I mean, in Needham, we could go there. And then there's storage and bathrooms and hallways and kitchens, all within that period, that space. So we looked at that. We asked some people in the building industry, give us a really conservative cost per square foot of what a building like that. And they said $700. I know that's high, even today. But that's what we're looking at, is $700 per square foot. It comes out to roughly $12 million to do an 18,000 square foot building, and then another million or so to take down the building. We will tell you that 13,000 square feet could probably do it. However, the town has indicated to us that we ought to consider an additional 5,000 for a potential expansion from the town hall. I would answer it a little differently. When we talked to the various communities, they all said, we wish we had built it bigger. And that's not an unusual statement. So that's why we're looking at 18,000 square feet to do that. The way those buildings are all managed is one entity runs them. The rooms may be used by 3 or 4 groups during the period of a day. They're built appropriately to do that, and they're scheduled. And those occupancies, instead of ours is closer to 20 to 30%, their occupancy in terms is closer to 60 to 70, 80%. It's just how you manage it and how you do it. Some people have said, how can an 18,000 square foot building work over a 40,000? They can't work better. They're going to work more efficiently. That's pretty much it. We're talking about phase 1, which is we've just completed. We will be asking from the town meeting for a total of, the total cost to do work for renovation and or new would be roughly $400,000. With that, we go out and hire an owner's project manager. We go out and hire an architect. You do a feasibility study where you spend time talking to anybody in all groups to decide exactly what you want and what you want in the building. And then the architect works on schematics. He or she is also, if you do renovation, has to really understand what kind of work needs to be done over there. I don't believe that really has totally been done, so you're going to have to do that. Were you going to ask a question?
No.
So that's phase 2. We would then come to a town meeting and ask for the funds for a design build based on what the town feels is the right building they want. And that would probably be in a year, year and a half. And from there, you go and you do final construction drawings. This is phase 3, and you build. And that would take about a year and a half to 2 years, roughly. Anything else?
So I think, in a nutshell, to summarize, what the work that's been done by the group is really to focus on programs and programs that the town utilizes in determining what buildings are best suited for these kinds of programs. What we're presenting to the town isn't a final decision, but it's basically 2 options. We have determined that you can either renovate the building, and within the renovation, there's a couple of options available to you. Or alternatively, you can build a new building. We haven't professionally costed this out. We don't have designs. These are ideas and concepts. So at town meeting, what the citizens will vote on, they can vote on both options. They can make a decision, we are only interested in renovation, and then if that's the case, then we will use the funds to put together a design and schematics and better costs for just a renovation. Or secondly, they can vote for a new building, and by the same token, at that point, we'll put together designs and schematics for those, or both. So, or none.
So we're asking the town at this meeting to give you, the selectmen, a direction so you know what direction we should go in. I want to clarify one thing when I said 400,000.
I was going to.
It's really, the town gave us 200,000 2 years ago. We've spent 5. So there's 195,000 there. So we're really only asking for 200 at this town meeting if we look at both options.
Right, and I think that's what's confusing but important is the financial ask. So if the town decides to look at both options, which they can decide to do, we will be looking for an incremental $205,000 of appropriations to be made at town meeting.
Correct.
If the town decides on one option, will we be asking for 5,000? Or no?
We can.
Yeah, if the town decides on one option, and I think there's an important nuance here. If the town decides they don't want to move forward with either option, there is a significant amount of deferred maintenance that needs to occur, but that deferred maintenance project was voted down at the prior town meeting in 2018 because there were a lot of questions about, well, what kinds of heating systems are you going to put in there? What exactly are you going to put in there? And we determined engineering studies were required. So if both articles fail, the funds that we have available to us right now will be used to hire engineers to put together engineering studies so that we will be ready to come to town meeting in May 2020 and have answers to the questions that we were asked and couldn't answer at the previous town meeting.
I sort of want to reiterate that point.
Right, because I think that's missed.
Very important.
Right.
If we have a renovation plan and our new plan that are voted down negatively, then the responsibility for taking care of the building rests with you, the
Still
Board of
exists,
Selectmen.
correct.
And therefore, you will have, because there's already money in the system, to go out and do the proper studies to come to maybe the May town meeting with a final recommendation to maintain the building, not improve it, just maintain it and move forward. And I think people, I find as I talk to them, they get a little confused. What's that third option?
Yeah.
Is there a third option? Well, there really isn't a third option that you asked us to look at, but in fact, they have the third option. They can say no, no, yes.
In
Well,
effect, the
it's-
reason
it's
for
a
Article 11
default. It's-
in May.
Right, it's a default option.
That was in effect the reason for Article 11 that we voted for in May, to have
Right.
that money in hand.
That's right. I never really considered doing the critical maintenance or maintaining the building as an option. That's something
It's a
that.
need.
It's a need, it's something that we actually have to do. And so when we talked about drafting the original mission, we focused on, so we came back after the May 18 meeting, trying to figure out what a step forward would be. And we decided that it probably made the most sense to give the town options, to tell us what they would like us to do with the Carroll facility, and more importantly, how they thought we would be in the best position to provide public space for community use at the town center. And when we talked about it, this is all historical, you know, it was, well, you have a building, there's two things you can do with it, right? You can fix it up, or you can replace it. And it was never a question at the time that we created the mission, there was never a question about a third option, because we never thought about maintaining the building as anything but an obligation. And it's not really a choice. It's something that we need to do. So when we come back and we present at town meeting, and the goal of this committee was really to do an assessment, do an analysis of what renovating meant, and develop a proxy for what new building would look like, and we had to do that by talking to other towns. But ultimately, our objective was really to provide the town with the information that they wanted or needed to make an informed decision about which option to take. So
And we were addressing questions that we got at the 2018
18 meeting, yep.
town meeting. And, you know, to go with an option 3 and ask for $5 million without having
we don't have,
done-
we never did take a
without
hard look
doing
at that.
any of the work that the town asked us to do,
Exactly.
you know, is not a
Wouldn't be-
wise thing.
Right, it's not a wise thing.
So the thing to do would be to use those funds to
Right,
get
if
the
it's no,
engineering
then we should
studies.
take the money
Right.
and do the engineering work around remediation.
Because it's our building, it's our obligation, we have to maintain it. And I think what's important, this isn't a debate about whether or not it should be a community center. In the 20-so years, it's a little less, 18 years, that we've been looking at it, it is a community center. So we have a community center. The question is, can we make it better?
Well, do we have a quality
Right,
community center?
right.
And I think-
so
And
but I think that's really
compliant
important.
community
And
center.
compliant,
That-
and
And
you come,
From a
compliance is
security
really important.
when
standpoint.
you do come back, I mean, look at, so when we looked at the 15 or so communities, and we did that so we wanted to understand the space that they used, that the programs that they ran, who was housed in terms of town departments, and how it was managed. I mean, it really is, it's kind of a generic bottle when you look at 15 different towns. And Ford, you know, sort of spoke about it from a space perspective. So they all have several rooms, they have large rooms, they have offices. But what they have is a wide range of programs. That span the interests of multi-age groups. And so when you go into these facilities, that's what you see. It's a multi-age, it's a wide array of programs. And the thing that impressed me the most is the vitality of these community centers. And so whether you believe in if you build it, they will come, or if you renovate it, they will come. What we saw was whether they renovated it, people did come, demand went up. Or if they built new, the same thing happened, demand went up. And it does foster something that I think is clearly at risk in the world today, is a real sense of community. This is all, when you boil it all down, it comes down to a value judgment about community. Sorry.
So,
Mr. Rapetti had,
go ahead.
would you mind, Mr. Rapetti?
Well, thank you. First, I'd like to thank Ford and this committee for doing an outstanding job, and thank the selectmen for authorizing the committee to research the various options. My role as moderator is really just to ensure that all the data necessary to make an informed decision is available to the people who attend town meeting. And in that regard, several people have asked me about the minimum maintenance option, so to speak. In particular, if the two options, the $13 million renovation or the new building, are both approved at this town meeting, will there be enough funds available to be able to present at the subsequent town meeting where we're approving a final project what the minimum maintenance option would require in terms of expenditures? Because I think that from, people have already expressed.
Could you elaborate as to what you
Yeah.
mean by minimum?
Well, Ford had mentioned at some prior meetings that I've attended that the thought was that to simply keep the building up and running would cost approximately $5 million. And people, roughly, yeah.
So, we have about $200,000 that the town has appropriated for critical maintenance.
Right.
And I think we got 100,000 in addition at the last town meeting. So if I were to parse my understanding of this, assuming, so we have, if the town votes to renovate, I think it's relatively straightforward. If just relative to, if they decide to go new.
Well, I want to make sure, Bob, that we're talking on the same page
Yes.
here, because it's my understanding that the articles that you're considering are to study what the cost would involve for various options relating to the community
To do that
center.
work, yes.
So option one might be to build a new building. Option two might be to do an extensive renovation. And then people have been asking me, well, what about the minimal maintenance that's required to have a functional building, but otherwise leave it as it is?
So that's the default option.
Right.
So we know there have been numerous studies
Right.
that we have deferred maintenance that has to get done, and that deferred maintenance will cost us $5 million.
And that's the question, that's my question.
So, but there are components to that deferred maintenance.
Right.
And a lot of the questions we got was, well, why aren't you considering a heat pump? Why aren't you considering, for the new boilers, why aren't you considering more energy efficient things? So to provide costs for those options, we need to do an engineering study.
Yeah.
So if the town decides they don't want to do either of these, we need to spend the funds that we have available to do an engineering study to look, because a majority of this $5 million is an HVAC system and controls.
And
And then you have ADA.
ADA
compliance.
compliance.
Robin, that really goes to the crux of my question. This may very well come up 2 years from now, at the town meeting 2 years from now. At that time, I think you can reasonably expect there will be questions about whether the $5 million estimate for the default option, as you term it, is still a valid estimate. So my question for you to consider in terms of thinking about what information people are going to need 2 years from now to make an informed decision is there going to be enough available
To update the
to
deferred.
update the study? Because you're really going to have a study, let's assume that option one and option two pass.
Okay.
So you're going to be studying two different approaches to the community center. And then you always have the default option lurking in the background as the final option, really. And I've spoken to Chris about this before, and I wanted to bring it out in the public so you could all consider it. I just think that a lot of people who have asked me about it have been similarly confused and have been worried about whether we would have accurate numbers available to make an informed decision
2 years from
2 years from now. So really, it's a very simple question when you get to the ultimate object, which is, if the town approves the amounts that we're discussing now for option one and two, and with the $195,000 residual, will that be enough to ensure that we have the engineering studies necessary for people to have a reasonable estimate of the cost for the two options and the default option?
Yes.
Handle it? Yes.
The answer is yes.
And why I say that is if you're looking at renovation, you're going to start at the beginning. And starting at the beginning is going to cover the areas that you're talking about. And you're going to have probably a greater understanding that we may have now, or at least that I have now, of how the building works. So I think that's, it's a step-by-step, you're building when you're looking at renovation, step-by-step process. So you're going to have to start there, and you have to take a look at your heating system. So I think the work that needs to be done to look at just maintaining the building, the answer is, that's going to be done anyway.
I think, I think that's really important point to be prepared to make at this town meeting, because I suspect you're going to have some questions about that.
That's
And
an excellent
and-
observation.
Right.
And I think to Ford's point, the renovation is building blocks.
Right.
It's, how much does it cost,
Got it covered.
right, just to, replace things, bring things up to standard? Then the next step is doing some of the nice to haves, and then the third step is the really nice to have, which is.
Because when you look at renovation's the more difficult one than new. New is, I'm going to tell you, fairly simple. But the renovation is difficult because you got to understand the building and then how you're going to do it. So it's a step, exactly what Robin said, that you're going to have to look at it. I've also had the question from people, well, you're talking about a major renovation for the whole building. Do you really have to do that? Well, that's going to depend, number one, on the feasibility study. What do you want to have in there? Instead of 7 activity rooms, you just want to have 3 because you're going to limit your programs. So I think, we're going to be asked, can you just renovate half of it? Well, let's see what half of it gets us. So that's all part of the process.
Right, and just to be clear, this would be a feasibility study, it would be part of a feasibility study with respect to the renovation option.
Well, the feasibility study is mainly what's going to be in the building.
Right.
What do you want the building to be used for?
Okay.
I'm going to go back to Minuteman because that's what I know the best. The whole building was built on an education plan. The education plan, they took 7 years to put together. And then the building was designed around that. It's the same thing about a community center or your house. You build it around what you want to use it for.
I wouldn't renovate my house, I would tear it down. But that's a different.
No comment.
Right.
So Chris, I know you have had building experience and building projects that you've done before. How would you answer the moderator's question?
Yeah, I would just say that much of that work will be done if either 1 and/or 2 are voted yes by the project manager and the architect that we engage with.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think that you may have to make that point at this town meeting. And I think it's important that in the process of presenting or preparing that data, that it be something that can easily be discerned by people looking at the studies. Because I know it is very important. I've received already several calls about this meeting, more than I usually receive for a regular town meeting. And this has been one of the themes. As always, transparency, and I think your committee has been very transparent, and the selectmen have as well, in dealing with this. To continue that, I think that if those figures are easily accessible, that would help a lot.
I would advise them, just sitting here off the top of my head, go to the town website and take a look at the documents that are already in there that have done these studies. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be updated, because they should.
Right.
But all that information is on the town website right now. So if those questions are being asked, and if people are listening to what I'm saying, go to the town, and if you see things that are missing, fine, let us know. But the information, Kathy Weld and her committee did an exceptional job. That information's.
Jim, thank you. The comments are very helpful and very much appreciated by us and Ford, and thank you very much for it. And you could be the first moderator in the history of town government to preside over 14 annual meetings where a community center has been involved. This could be a world's record, but it is duly noted that this has been a process that you have put time and effort. And Ford, my initial comments were going to be, if you had sleepless nights this past week, it's been 1 year, Tuesday, since you began this process. This board appointed you a year ago.
It's shorter than that.
It was a year ago when we started.
Carol does not give me sleepless nights, ever.
No, in this conversation. But thank you. And could you just remind people of the members of your committee? Because we have put you and the board have put a lot of time into the committee, and the committee has done a lot of work for the town.
Aaron Radat Savla, Bob Springett. Who else do we have? Richard Forte, Leslie Godfrey Shute, Terry Sobolewski, Amy Collins.
Should all be thanked. and
Absolutely.
should
But
remind-
beyond that, there are a lot of other people,
Right.
stakeholders that have been involved in that, from people who represent the Council on Aging, from people who've been the Park and Recreation, the Dover Mothers Group. The Town Hall has been extremely helpful with this. You know, I would say there have been probably more than 20 people active in this process to varying degrees.
It just goes back to what Tracy said at the very beginning. This has been a process that a lot of various groups have looked at and been a part of.
And what I think people ought to do is one, we produced a document called Summary of Findings, Frequently Asked Questions. This really summarizes all the work that we have done very distinctly. Also, we've answered 20 questions that are frequently asked, and that is,
To add the 21st.
That's in there.
that's not it's sort of in there, but it's not a frequently asked question. Jim just asked it. So those are all in there.
He got asked it frequently.
We also have a website, www.carolproject.info, that has a wealth of information on it, including the town website, which has some similar information, but a lot of the older information. There's a lot of material out there for people to look at. Right now, the committee is focused on one thing, getting people to the town meeting. So there's a letter to the editor in the paper today, written by a whole group of organizations trying to get people. I'm going to hand out a flyer, which is going to be distributed everywhere, and that flyer talks about, we're having on September 9th at 7 p.m. in this building, a forum. On September 16th at 10:30 a.m., a forum. And September 23 at 7 p.m., a forum. And I don't want to spoil this for everybody, but the presentation is going to be our town meeting presentation. So you're going to get to hear it 2 or 3 times as you go through. It's going to be filmed yesterday. There was a filming over at the Carroll Center with about 8 to 10 citizens talking about the process. So we're out there talking, really coming to town meeting.
And this is also on the front page of the website.
And it's on the front page of the website, this document, so,
Of the town's website.
yes.
Yeah, you got to be clear. There's really two
Well,
sites.
It also gives you it gives you the link to
Links, right.
the info site.
So-
So everything is there.
You have the carolproject.info, you have the homepage of the town website has a link that takes you to. And my question, or what I think, is you really have to go to the CMAC page to get the
Have a link
historical
there as
data.
well.
Do you have it in there for CMAC? Okay.
And we will all be at Dover Days
Which
for
is
those, which is not this Saturday, but a week from Saturday.
14th.
The 14th. So please, seek us out. We will be there. We're doing everything possible to spread all of this information. Professor?
This is a good leeway into the next item, which is actually the warrant articles for the special town meeting. So, thank you.
I don't need any more of these.
So this part of the agenda is to talk about and to finalize the October 7th special town meeting warrant articles. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Plum.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. You did a great job. There's really not much more that I can add. You heard from the Carroll Community Center this evening on their work and the articles in which that they are recommending be presented to voters on October 7th at the special town meeting. And now it's really up to the board to finalize out what those articles will be and to close the warrant.
So we basically have 3 scenarios, is that correct?
There are 3 scenarios as
Two are-
I've heard.
Right.
And do we need to move on all 3 of the scenarios, or can we adopt just one?
No, you need to vote on one.
Which,
Right.
which in my reading of these would be the second one.
So, right, so the second one is to develop cost estimates and preliminary designs for the renovation of Carroll. 2, develop cost estimates and preliminary designs for a new community center building at Carroll. And the third is to fund critical maintenance and, so it's not to fund the repairs, but to fund engineering studies that will help us determine the extent.
It's not the fund, is it?
So the 3 scenarios that have been discussed in meetings and by the Carroll Community Center and by folks are, the first scenario is to have 3 article questions. The first 2 are renovate the building, build a new building, or enter into design for that critical maintenance. But as we discussed this evening, that has already been approved by voters last year for the town to be able to do so. So I think there's a question of, well, is there really a need to ask that question again if we've already gotten approval?
Right, and I think it's important maybe at the outset of the meeting to explain to the citizens what we're voting on. So again, the town has already approved $200,000. That $200,000 could be used for a design to renovate or build new the community center, to put together feasibility studies. We, at the time, we were thinking it was one or the other. What we're presenting to the town now is the option to do both. And if the town votes to do both, we're asking for an additional $200,000. So the way to think about this is, it's $200,000 to do the design or the feasibility study for renovate. It's an additional $200,000, renovate or build new. But if you want to do both, you have to give us, you have to appropriate another
Right.
200. If you don't want to do either, then we are going to take the funds that are already there and use them for an engineering study so that we understand our choices with respect to doing some of the critical maintenance. Did I summarize that correctly?
You did summarize that, and if that's the board's thought and the sentiment, then I'd recommend the scenario 3, which is to have
Right.
simply 2 articles on the warrant.
Right.
So renovate Article 1 or Article 2 or build new, or there's 2 articles.
Correct.
Okay.
So then, do you want to discuss this? I can make a motion. So I move to close the October 7th, 2019 special town meeting warrant, effective today, September 5th, and have council draft the following 2 articles. 1, to develop cost estimates and preliminary designs for a renovated Carroll Community Center, and 2, to develop cost estimates and preliminary design for a new community center.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That was so simple.
Well, with Jim's comments, we don't, I personally had funding. That funding word was, I thought, important, but as you articulated, it's not necessary.
But I think it's very, very important at the beginning of the meeting to explain to all the citizens there as simply as possible what we're going to be doing this evening, and to say, if
if town meeting votes no on either of these options, there is critical maintenance that we all know has to happen at that building. The estimates we have is around $5 million, but we are going to use the $200,000 that we have to put together engineering plans and design so that at town meeting, we can bring to you a formal plan and really good cost estimates on the cost to do the deferred, which we know is critical.
I need to go on record, though, on behalf of the committee, which voted for 3 articles. I don't need a comment, but that's what the committee voted.
I would also like, we did receive an email from Mrs. Weld, and I think it's important that her comments be known. She could not attend the meeting today. And she, her concern is similar to the concern that you addressed, is she wanted to make sure that there were sufficient funds available for the critical maintenance. And so I hope we have addressed those concerns. But again, at the special town meeting, it's not what we would vote on. I walked away from the town meeting where the boilers failed and the other critical maintenance failed with the idea that we didn't present enough data to the town. There were too many unanswered questions. Not that there wasn't support for it, there were just too many unanswered questions. And for us as a board, it would be irresponsible to go back and ask at the special town meeting for the $5 million without having answered those questions. And so if they both fail, we know what our mandate is, and we will use the funds so that we can put engineering studies in place and then answer all the questions that were asked at the town meeting in 2018.
And I would just reiterate to Jim and the selectmen, that needs to be very, very clear at the beginning of the meeting.
Yes, absolutely.
Really clear. And I can reiterate it, but I think it needs to come from the town.
Yeah.
So
It needs to come from the selectmen.
Right, and I would agree. I think we
Would
have
agree.
to have some opening comments, and we will explain what we are and what we aren't doing at town meeting. Because another critical thing is that, I say this in jest, but it's important that citizens understand this.
Yeah.
For 18 years, that has functioned as a community center. So we're no longer debating whether or not we need a community center.
There's a moderators meeting on September 26th at 6:30. So we can discuss there also, as we do for our other town meetings, the order of presentations and who will do the speaking. And Robert, just to pick up on your excellent point, it's important that people understand that even if both options are voted for, that the minimal maintenance is always in the background and the data will be collected
Right.
for.
Exactly.
It
And I think
can't,
that's a very important point.
it just cannot be assumed as
Right.
part of the first line.
So again, thank you very much, and, speaking for people who attend town meeting, we really appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
And I appreciate you raising that point and making us understand what the concern is, because, we're so focused on the mission, and I think this committee has done a fantastic job, and it's important to understand what concerns the citizens have so that we can answer them.
Thank you. I have to go to a Carroll Community Center Committee meeting. It's meeting in 3 minutes.
Okay,
Thank you, Ford.
thank you. So the next item of business is our IT assessment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm before the board this evening with this item, seeking the board's permission to allow me to move forward with finalizing a scope of services for an IT infrastructure assessment to assess the town's underlying IT infrastructure, frankly. This stems from work that Selectman Springett has done, as well as the rest of the board, from a vote last town meeting, which appropriated some monies to fund IT studies and IT efforts and IT support to ensure that the town of Dover has the appropriate infrastructure, the appropriate IT needs to conduct its business, for staff to use presently, and to build recommendations on how do we get to an ideal or optimal state to provide continued services to the residents of Dover. So this is really what's before you tonight. The request of the basic IT infrastructure study is really the foundational kind of first step to assess what we presently have. Is there anything critical that we should immediately pursue? And then what does the kind of 1, 3, and 5-year roadmap of best practices and recommendations look like? Selectman Springett and members of the Technology Advisory Board have been meeting over the past few months. They've been working and meeting with vendors to hear what vendors can provide by way of an IT infrastructure assessment. And they have decided and determined and voted to recommend that we move forward with Retrofit Technologies to provide us with this core IT assessment. Their proposal is in your binders here this evening. It is around $3,000, which is relatively inexpensive for an audit like this. It's pretty comprehensive. It'll look at our network, at our systems, cybersecurity, a lot of the critical things. So that's where we're at. That is the ask tonight. If the board so chooses, I will move forward and work with Diana, our IT manager, as well as members of the TAB, to really refine and ensure that the scope of services that we want from them is robust and comprehensive. And then I'll also move forward and execute that contract so we can go ahead and have that study done. It's anticipated that the date of which we sign that contract, it'll take about 2 to 3 weeks for the company to be able to conduct this survey and then move on to those next steps of where we want to be. So I would, I guess I'd defer to Selectman Spring if there's anything else that he wanted to add on this item this evening.
I would add that what the Technology Advisory Board has decided would be a particularly, or actually in a more effective way forward, is to segment the work that has to be done. Going back to the May 2019 town meeting, we presented sort of a very high-level proposal to do both a workflow and a technology assessment. As we discussed at one first or second meeting, there was a feeling that was too broad, that we needed to segment the work, and then this particular piece of work seemed to be given the sort of a logical first step. And I think the board was unanimous in that. Well, 4 out of the 4 members who were there voted yes. Okay, so I'm good.
I think this is critical path. I mean, this is, even with my limited IT knowledge, this is the first step. I mean, you
Yes,
have to
exactly.
know what you have before you can begin to fix things. And I wish we had done this weeks ago. So
Yeah. This
I
process,
say we move forward.
this process began, I think, the first week of July last year with Jerry and members of a lot of different groups that we went out to and asked, and the Technology Advisory Group, and Bob, the work that you've done, we started that last year, so it's been a lot of people with a lot of thought. And would you like to add anything to this, Jerry?
Well, I think what became clear out of the several formal meetings that were held starting in late July was that it would be unfair to any prospective vendor, and it would be unfair to the town to attempt to go ahead and offer a contract on a large scale of how do we address workflow tasks, how do we address what functionality is being done, without first clearly stating, without omission, where we were in terms of hardware and software platform. Ms. HISAC has done an excellent job in providing a basis for that at the high level, at the network components. But now we have to get down to what is going on each desk, every peripheral device, and the proposal that was offered that the board recommends be executed is a fairly straightforward process that is well understood by the vendor, is well understood by the board, and their time frame that they offer is truly exceptional. That was thought of quite.
I think it's due to the not uncomplex systems that we have in place.
I'm sorry.
I said, I think they're able to do it as quickly as they can.
Yeah,
because we don't really
well,
have
yes and no.
them.
I mean, there are complexities in that there are things such as we may have machines that we don't even know that are sitting somewhere.
So I think, Jerry, help me out here. I think part of it is an automated process that they're going to use.
Yes, they have a software tool that will sit on the network and identify all of the participants on the network. That still leaves the opportunity for isolated devices
Right.
that we'll have to locate.
So that's,
And the critical thing here is we're also being forced into this. You can't wait on this because almost all of the systems in the town are unlikely to be supported by Microsoft after January of 2020. So that sort of sets you a deadline of getting your act together.
Right, so,
Well said.
you know, I think
And
we're
it's
all,
spice.
right, I think we're all in agreement that this needs to happen, so I'm
So,
gonna.
Madam
I'm
Chair.
going to make the motion.
Well, I was going to say, you do. This is your,
So I move to authorize the town administrator to finalize a scope of services for an IT infrastructure assessment and to execute the contract upon completion of the scope of services.
So,
seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Chairman?
are they starting tomorrow?
The other piece of it is, so the one piece is an automated piece, and then they have to have people on site to follow up on the manual side of the thing.
Madam Chairman, I apologize. I couldn't make your 6:30 start time. The past 2 days have been rather hectic for me, as you may understand. Could I get 2 minutes and that's it? Just to discuss where we are with a certain
Can you put
issue?
those up here and turn them
I would
around?
like to put them up here. Those
you-
are 2 of the 3 items.
Would you also introduce yourself as
Oh,
the...
yes. Which camera am I on here? Okay. My name is Gerald Clark. I'm Chair of the Board of Health. Many of you have received what was an urgent newsletter from the board, actually 2 of them. The second was an update. Over the last 2 years, we've been quite fortunate that the board has been able to reach out and create contacts and correspondence and knowledge of who in the state and at the county we would want to be able to be in contact with should various types of health emergencies arise. I was literally driving out of Dedham Center Wednesday afternoon, or Tuesday afternoon, I've lost track at this point, when we received a phone call from Massachusetts Department of Public Health informing us that indeed a test location which traps mosquitoes had, when the proper process had gone forward, don't forget we had a holiday weekend, from the Wednesday the 27th when they were collected, it took until Tuesday for the laboratory of the epidemiology lab of the Massachusetts DPH to identify the infection of Eastern equine encephalitis. This is not to say that there is the disease among people, but it is among insects that have been collected. As soon as we learned that, the task was to find where the specific trap was located. That actually required a Freedom of Information Act because of the nature of the laws involved, which we were able to acquire the information, identify where it was. I'll just say it's somewhat to the west of town center, not very far. And that, given that information,
we knew that we wanted to alert residents, and particularly the school superintendent, that was critical in our mind, and the Park and Rec. And we had actually, with Park and Rec, a discussion, and with Dr. Keogh, a discussion last week prior, in which we came to an accord that sporting events would be terminated early before the hours of dusk, which are the primary times when mosquitoes are abroad. This wasn't to penalize the sports teams, it was to protect people. Subsequently, we have learned of horses that have gone down in Medfield, in Holliston, and other surrounding communities, so it's not something to be omitted. We urge horse owners, if they haven't, to use the available vaccination to vaccinate their horses. What we did do in the past some 30 hours was arrange for Norfolk County Mosquito Control to come in this coming Friday, weather permitting, to spray in the vicinities of the playing fields, but not in the school, that's a legal issue, so as to cover those areas. And today we were able to consummate an agreement with Norfolk County to have residents communicate with Norfolk County, and we have now some 70 or more residents who are participating, weather permitted and time permitted, in having residential areas sprayed by Norfolk County Mosquito Control. Now, having said that, the reason I have these here is I don't personally think any of those measures are going to be anywhere near as effective as personal protection. The best thing you can do is avoid going outside unprotected during dusk hours and early dawn. And when you go out, if you are going to go out, consider wearing a long sleeve shirt and long pants, and by all means, all exposed skin should be sprayed with a minimum of 25% DEET. It is not harmful. 25% is the maximum allowable for small children, but everybody else, it's no problem. And I don't have it with me, but there's another chemical that we strongly recommend, and that is permethrin, which is a spray to be sprayed on your clothes. It will last through 6 washings. And if anyone has any concern about permethrin, if you're a parent who ever had to deal with head lice that your child picked up in school, the shampoo you used contains permethrin.
So, Mr. Clark, thank you very much. I would also like to thank the town administrator and the town for the last week before the long holiday weekend for pulling all the parties together with the Board of Health and posting on the website the same warning to citizens of
No,
Dover.
we wrote that for him, but understand, I mean, right now, and this is one of the...
Mr. Clark, you know, I think emergency issues like this are really important for the town to get information. And in my mind, what we need to do is work together with the boards and committees to put together a comprehensive communication plan so that we have one source of factual information going out to all town residents. Because the town residents do, you know, contact the town administrator. The school superintendent has 2 towns he's dealing with. So he gets questions when only one town is communicating information. So what this brought to light was this has been communicated very effectively, but together we need to work on putting together a communication strategy, you know, to use social media outlets as well as the town website, as well as you know, Board of Health website, so that we can get information out to our citizens as quickly as possible.
I'd like to respond to that because there are some things that aren't clear in what you said. First of all, the regional school is split.
Mr. Clark, we're not debating this, it's just
But it's miscommunication.
No, there is no, I am not saying there's any miscommunication. What I am asking is that we work together in the future to put together a policy
to communicate these issues as one organization. That's all I'm asking. A coordinated effort.
But when it
I'm
comes
not
to the school,
pointing-
you can't.
I am not, but I'm not, Mr. Clark, in this meeting, when we work together to pull together an effort, if challenges arise, we'll find a way
Can I
to
explain the
best
difference?
communicate. I'm not asking to put together a policy
I'm not-
now.
no, I'm just trying to get
not pointing
across.
fingers. You know, what was done was done. All I'm asking is if we can work together.
There's a structural problem, given the schools.
You will be invited to the meeting and we can talk about it. We have a lot of things on our agenda this evening. You know, and we can include the superintendent in the conversation.
It's not the superintendent's problem, other than he has to deal with it.
But he needs to get information.
He does.
Timely.
And he did. But there were two
And nobody's
counties involved, and they operate differently.
Mr. Clark, we all need to work together. This is not saying one organization is doing something wrong in any way.
I didn't say that.
It just brought to my attention, and perhaps I am wrong, that a coordinated effort would be the right way to move forward in the future with these kinds of issues. All I'm asking, because
And it is-
everybody gets questions, so we all need to have the same information at the same time, so when residents reach out to all these different groups, we can all have the same answers to give them. That's all I'm trying to
Two
achieve.
separate counties.
Yes, and the structures that we deal with complicate
That's right.
the opportunity, but we still need to figure out a way to have a coordinated response.
I
To-
think Dr. Keough had that. He was presiding.
Yeah, so that's all. And it's really hard because of the way we're organized. Absolutely understand that. So thank you. I thought you
I
guys,
know you're gonna leave this for us, so when we leave the building, we can.
these
say
guys are sold
ourselves.
out. I don't even know how you get
And
these.
The truth of the matter is, I'm strongly thinking of using some Board of Health funds for next year, just so people understand. Now, this whole next week, we're looking at nighttime temperatures in the low 50s. So if that holds true, the risk level drops substantially. But I was strongly thinking that the board,
We're in danger of leaving the building, so maybe you should leave some of this for us.
no, I,
So I did think, Jerry, I thought the communications out is particularly about things to do, how to protect yourself. I thought that was really clear.
that's what I wanted to get out,
was-
because it's not spraying.
Right,
It's
no,
what
it was-
you do for yourself.
Yes, it was very clear and it was well presented, so thanks.
Where's your long sleeve shirt?
He got here early. It was before dusk when
It
he
was before dusk, and I actually had sprayed myself, so I'm not very concerned, particularly now that the temperature's heading towards 60.
Well, I'm concerned about my legs, that's why I asked if you could.
Would you like a spray?
No, let's move on.
let's go. Thank you, Jerry.
So,
So the next.
Thank you.
The next item of business is the appointment of our town administrator as Dover representative to the West Suburban Health Group Board of Directors.
I
Which has-
move to appoint Chris as Dover representative to the West Suburban Health Group Board of Directors.
We have to say Chris Dwelly?
Oh, God, sorry, Chris Dweller.
Christopher.
Christopher. Is there a junior or a middle initial or anything you want me to put in there?
Throw an M in there if you'd like, Christopher M.
Christopher M. Thank you.
So
Christopher
moved.
M.
All in
Seconded.
favor?
Aye.
That doesn't come with any big salary on it.
It does not, unfortunately.
It comes with a lot of learning. It'll be a great experience. So next, we have a couple of appointments. And so I'm just going to make a motion. Again, we really appreciate all those citizens that volunteer. This town would not function without all the work of the citizens that do volunteer for these various committees. I'd like to thank everybody. So the first motion is to reappoint to the Council of Aging Board of Directors the Reverend Peter DeSanto, Robert Cox, and Camille Johnson, who's in attendance this evening.
Thank you, Camille.
Each for a 3-year term, effective July 1st, 2019 through July 30th, 2020. Do we need to vote on these individually, or can I just appoint everybody and then?
Is this appointments to the consent agenda? It's appointments?
It's appointments.
I'd move to appoint each individual person.
Okay, so do I have?
So moved.
Seconded,
favor?
seconded, yes. Aye.
Thank you to all those. Next, I move to reappoint to the Council on Aging Board of Directors Geraldine Weiss and Ruth Townsend, each for a one-year term, also effective July 1st and June 30th, 2020.
Second.
You can't second till I move.
You moved, so moved.
Move, second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. And last, I would like to move to appoint to the Recycling Committee Lisa Mullen to fill a 3-year term of Mayak John, who resigned August 2019. And this term will be through June 30th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And again, thank you to all those that volunteered. I guess including us.
Hey, you're paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Big bucks.
Way,
Bucks.
way too much, but just saying.
The update I have for the rail trail is I did connect with the Friends of the Dover Greenway, and we are going to just reconvene and set up a meeting to discuss the next steps, and Mr. Drawley's going to help organize that meeting for us. So we should, in the next couple of weeks, have a path forward that we'll be able to report.
That'd be good, because one of the, although I don't get a lot of questions that Jim gets, I get questions on rail trail, so it'd be nice to have that.
So we were turned down, correct?
Turned down
For the grant?
We were turned down for the grant, and Chris and I actually had a very productive conversation with the grant coordinator, and we talked about, they encouraged us to reapply for a grant, which was encouraging, and B, she talked about what we needed to focus on next year when we reapply for the grant. So there were some things in the grant application that were unclear to the grant committee. So we really now have a much better idea. What they want you to focus on is connectivity, because that's their main focus. And then if that isn't something you can do, they want you to talk about the challenges that you face with connectivity. And what were some of the other things?
Ensuring that the materials used for the trail are ADA compliant and are accessible to ensure that anyone can enjoy the trail. And those are the primary two issues.
So, they felt that we had a very strong application. There were just some things that we could do better. And she spent over an hour with us going through the application that we had put in and discussing where we needed to make things more clear.
And what role did the Friends play? Or are they still involved?
They're still involved, and they actually helped us with the application.
And they're so willing to
Yes,
raise money?
right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Consent agenda, yeah?
It's the town administrator update.
It's out of order on the agenda versus what's in the binder.
Oh,
But I
okay.
defer to
What
the
do you
chair
mean?
on which he would like to take first.
I would like to get your update first, and then we can do the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few things I wanted to share with the board this evening. I'm getting very close to finalizing the Assistant Town Administrator position, which is a critical position here in town. The board afforded me with the opportunity to take some time to settle in, to speak with staff, to get a feel for the role, to get a better sense of what we really want in an assistant town administrator, what we want in that position to ensure that it's set up for success and really executes on the needs here in the community, the really robust set of goals that the board has set 2 weeks ago for the community for the next year, and to ensure that the position provides the necessary support to our other staff here in town. So the position will primarily, I would say, stay the same, but I really wanted to highlight some additional focus areas around special project management to really help get the board's goals and some of the other projects that have kind of been hanging out there that could really use someone to just focus on.
Champion.
And champion, absolutely. As well as the community has pursued a handful of grants, certainly in the past year or so, and would really like to continue to do that moving forward. And I think having an assistant or having a dedicated position really help kind of support and coordinate those efforts would be really valuable to the community, to be able to provide the community with grant funding, as well as to provide staff with helping to put those grants together so that we are eligible for those funds. And then the third piece, which is timely, and something that you just spoke of, Madam Chair, is really around communications and how the community is, and how the town is communicating with its residents, and what those channels, and what those channels are. So those are kind of the new areas that I'd like to include in that role, and those are traditional areas that you'll find in a lot of assistant town administrator positions throughout the Commonwealth. So hope to have that position description finalized tomorrow morning. We'll sit down with the personnel board to get that approval, and hopefully we can get that posted to the street next week. So I want to thank the board again for providing me with the opportunity to be able to assess truly what's needed in this position and really craft a position that will provide the town with great value for years to come.
You know, as I had mentioned to you, it was a tricky situation because we were without a permanent town administrator for so long, and we asked ourselves, are we doing the incoming town administrator a disservice by not having support for that person? But I think at the end of the day, this is the right thing happened for the town, and you know, you being here for the 2 or so months, you've gotten a better sense of what's needed, what type of role complements your role better. So I'm glad, in hindsight, I'm glad that we did wait or postpone in making that final decision. Could we get a copy of the job description?
Oh, of course, that'll go to you tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yep.
I had 2 other quick
Okay.
things, if I may.
You may.
With the approval this evening for the IT infrastructure assessment, coupled with the financial management review that will begin by the state in November, I thought it was prudent in speaking with the personnel board and in assessing the board's goals, to have the board consider that it might be worthwhile for us to enter into a small dollar one-time engagement with a HR kind of consulting firm to get a couple of the things that have kind of been outstanding that I know the board has been interested in moving forward on, that the personnel board has been interested in moving forward on, like updating our personnel policies and guidelines, ensuring that we're fully in compliance. Things that are just standard, that sometimes kind of fall down on the, not really on the priority list, but they get pushed to the side because of all the day-to-day work that's in front of us. And so this is certainly an area that would be covered by the assistant, but given that we, you know, are likely 2 months out, let's say, at best from hiring the assistant, it might make sense to have just someone come in and to bring us up to speed on those areas. I imagine it would be a very short dollar, but I just wanted to mention that to the board as something that, you know, I'd be interested in pursuing and to see what's out there in terms of vendors and what that cost would be. But it really helps us just kind of clear the deck on those items, and really allows the assistant to get focused on some of these items from day one.
I'm very supportive of that.
Yeah.
It's, you know, we should be compliant. It's work that you can bring and you can outsource and bring it in. And I mean, we have just been so short-staffed for so long that these are the types of things that.
That's a wise move.
Right,
I mean,
it's
to
a
bring
really
an
smart
outside
move.
firm. So what was the focus specifically? Is it to review what we have? Is it to do specific things?
That's a great.
Okay.
That's a great question, Selectman Springer. So the first is the town has a really robust and a really great set of personnel policies as it relates to staff They did a really great job. However, that has not been reviewed or updated
Okay.
in some time. And so, state and federal laws change over time, and you want to make sure that you kind of stay up to date with those. So that would be the first piece. The second is our part-time staff, unlike our full-time staff, who all our positions are classified based on a compensation scale, so that you know kind of what the minimum and mid and maximum range of those positions are. We don't have that for part-time staff, and so it makes it difficult for us to kind of peg when we hire part-time staff what they should be coming in at, what is market value for those, and so classification for our part-time staff would be very beneficial to the community. And then the third piece I think is important is to take a look at our annual review process on how we run through annual reviews for staff. I think it could use some updating. Those are very critical tools, really for staff, really, to be able to kind of work with management to develop a work plan and a roadmap and expectations for the future. It's a really fantastic tool if done well, and I think that's just one of those things that could be freshened up. So those are the three areas of focus. And I do just want to quickly add that the board and the residents through town meeting approved, I think it was an increased professional services line in the selectmen's budget, anticipating that you were without both a town administrator and an assistant town administrator for some time. So those are the funds that would be dropped.
We thought there might be some.
That's
need.
correct.
Yes.
Which is all good. It has worked out well. And just listening to your comments, Chris and Madam Chair, if I may, one of the things I think we would be remiss if we hadn't recognized both Mona for the hours, the mentoring, putting all the time, energy, and effort that she's put in during this process for training Chris, and Felicia. Oh yeah, don't think you can get up. But it's, listening to what you're saying, and as Madam Chair was discussing earlier, the time commitment that we've decided would be best for you came at the cost of not having people for a long time, and yet we haven't missed a beat, primarily because of the work you've done and Mona has done, and the entire townhouse staff have really done. So we've been shorthanded, and some of the things that you just mentioned that we in the private sector would consider a best practices review or a compliance review. We do that routinely because oftentimes we find that our best practices have to be congruent with what changes in the new laws or new regulations in my world.
Massachusetts recently changed.
Massachusetts changes the regulations
Every day by the
seemingly by the hour. So
For a while, we weren't exactly sure what was changing, but I think they've refined it because our handbook at work has gotten adjusted a couple of times.
So Mona, thank you. Felicia, thank you. And this is all part of this process, so thank you for
And
it.
if I could, I just want to, Mona and Felicia, I would not be successful. I would probably not be sitting here today if it weren't for these two. They've been absolutely incredible, as well as the whole staff here. It's a rock-solid crew, and it's a privilege to be part of the team. So I definitely thank them as well as the rest of the team. Yeah.
And they're fun.
Nice.
And they're fun.
Mona's fun. Felicia?
We've had that conversation.
And then
Moving on.
And then just the third quick item, if I may, I just wanted to pose to the board. This was around grant coordination. We talked about it tonight. We talked about it as part of the assistant. I know it's important to the board to look at supplemental and additional revenue streams here for our work. I think one thing that would benefit the community is, especially as we bring on the assistant, and if that's going to be part of their role, that before grants are applied for by staff or by committees, that they be sent through one central individual, whether it's primarily the Board of Selectmen's office. It's not really to slow things down or to stifle grant applications, but it's really just to ensure that we are not doubling up on our efforts.
Point
and
of
that we-
coordination again.
Exactly, coordination again, absolutely. So that's a recommendation I'd make to the board, and if you were supportive, my recommendation would be that all grant applications before they go out are just run by the Board of Selectmen's office via the town administrator at this point.
Yep.
I think that, I think informally it happens, but I think that's a great practice, because also what we learned from speaking to the woman with the rail trail grant, there's an art to.
There is an art.
Right, there is an art, so if you have somebody that's, is writing a lot of grants, they'll be able to help refine your application so that maybe you're more likely to get the grant.
That's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
John, you want to do the next one?
Consent agendas? Do you want me to read all 311?
I do.
Special requests? Madam Chair, I move the consent agenda as presented that includes special liquor licenses all in 2019 for September 8th, 13th, 14th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 22nd, 28th, and October 5th, and the Shafter Lane Block Party. Did we get invited?
I did.
On September 22nd, we will all attend.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And next, I guess I'm gonna hold, right, to go to executive session, not to return?
You might as well do not to return.
Okay. So,
Yes.
Yes.
yes. Thank you all, and have a good night.
Thank you all.